San Francisco is home to one of the most racially diverse communities in the world. The presence of racial diversity can be found in the Tenderloin, the Mission, Chinatown, Japantown, Little Italy, and more. However, racial diversity does not mean racial harmony. In the past few years, San Francisco has seen numerous instances of racial discrimination, hate crimes, and even the murders of several ethnic minorities.
84-year-old Vicha Ratanapakti died from his injuries in January.
This racism is not only in our city, it is consistent throughout our country. In 2020, George Floyd's murder shocked the nation.
Let him breathe, Lisa, man. I can't breathe. I've been trying to hear about
In response to subsequent hate crimes that targeted the Black community, protests erupted throughout the country.
The Black Lives Matter movement has been reignited.
Say her name.
Breonna Taylor!
Nearly 2.5 years after Breonna Taylor died in a hail of police gunfire during a botched drug raid, igniting a storm of protest across the country.
Later, as COVID-19 emerged, Asians became a widespread target of racism.
Asian Americans are being targeted from coronavirus-related hate, discrimination, and violence.
Police say a 54-year-old man named Patrick Thompson walked up and repeatedly stabbed two Asian women, one in her 80s and another in her 60s.
From Oakland to San Francisco, elderly Asians minding their own business have been beat up, knocked down, and robbed.
While racism toward Blacks and Asians have often been the spotlight in the media, we should never forget the racism that targets others.
This morning, one of the mural artists found this. The mural, which originally said, "We are on native land," had been covered with black paint with writing that said no such thing.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
President Donald Trump signed an executive order that banned people from 7 Muslim-majority countries from entering the U.S. for 90 days.
Every racial minority in San Francisco experiences racism, and it's not just perpetuated by white people. Tensions between minority groups also contribute to the problem. To showcase the state of racism in San Francisco, here are the stories of 7 San Franciscans representing the Native American, Asian, Black, Latinx, and Middle Eastern communities. Shariah identifies primarily as Native American and is the executive director of the American Indian Cultural District of San Francisco.
You know, San Francisco started as Yolamu with Arumatush Ohlone people here in San Francisco. And then you had the wave, of the Spanish folks that came in and built the missions and brought in American Indian slavery to build those missions, with an average lifespan of 10 years and roughly 14,000 folks that had passed away, American Indian folks that had passed away because of Mission Dolores. We talk about the missions, but we build pretty glitter missions and we talk about Christianity, but do we talk about the fact that the average lifespan was 10 years? Do we talk about the fact that the missions were built on native slavery? And do we talk about, the really painful past of rape and indentured servitude and, the painful history? So we grow up that way in K-12 and we're conditioned that way even in college as adults to see people as people who aren't here and people of the past. It's the way that we have, Washington mural on our school that depicts, racist slavery of American Indians, and we walk by and we say that's okay. Would we do that with other communities of color? I'm not so certain. I don't dance, I don't sing, I try not to in public spaces because people see that as a show.
Shariah underlines the importance of understanding the history of the Native Americans and how that history has shaped the racism they face today. While it is often the Black and Asian communities that are in the spotlight of the media, other communities like the Native American community face the challenge of being recognized and respected. John Osaki is the leader of the Japanese Community Youth Council. What impacted his upbringing is the fact that his entire community was once incarcerated.
In 1942, when decisions were being made about whether or not to incarcerate Japanese Americans following the bombing of Pearl Harbor, a gentleman named Earl Warren was campaigning for California's governor position. And he ran on a platform of locking up Japanese Americans, sending them back to Japan. And that was the platform he used to get elected. It was successful. And I think for Japanese Americans, it's, you know, a very unique experience, being really rounded up like, you know, animals, being sent to horse stalls, being put behind barbed wire for multiple years with armed guards pointing guns at you. My father and mother were both incarcerated during World War II. They were both rounded up and locked up. And my father was in prison for 4 full years at the Tule Lake Segregation Center. My father and mother, who were born in this country, who are American citizens, and yet this country blamed them for the Japanese imperial military attack on Pearl Harbor, which they had absolutely nothing to do with.
John Ozaki highlights that one defining aspect of racism is the tendency for stereotypes to pervade our thinking. While it is a sad reality, there are still many people today who ascribe the acts of individuals or groups to entire populations. John Henry, who grew up in San Francisco all his life, is the executive director of Both Sides of the Conversation, a nonprofit that provides resources through effective conversations that empower the Black and Brown communities.
So the Black community is a very strong community. You know, at times, given what goes on in the community and some of the challenges systemically that's faced upon the community, it can seem territorial, it can seem very divided, it can seem like it's no motion at times. But collectively, as a community, it is strong. It's a resilient people. But definitely, given some of the circumstances, some of the systemic things that's been put up against the community, it is definitely challenging. Racism still exists here in San Francisco. I would probably say it's probably worse now than ever. You know, I think people who say there's no issues, they say that racism doesn't exist, are typically people who are well off, are maybe disconnected from the community. If you look around the city and see the things that's taking place in all of our communities, I don't believe a person could say that there is no racism. I mean, you look at the disparities, you look at some of the recent incidents that's taken place, it's definitely racism that exists, and we need to acknowledge it and confront it. In Chinatown or in Japantown, there's no Black businesses in there, and typically in those communities, there's no Black employees. But in the Black community, there's Asian businesses, different other culture businesses. And again, they still at times will not hire people from the community, and it causes attention. And if we really talk about solidarity and equity and inclusion, you know, people should have an opportunity in all communities to have businesses, employment, if we really talk about, you know, solidarity and inclusion in the community. You know, during COVID, there's a lot of resources that were coming into the community, and in the Black community in particular. And there was a number of folks from outside of the community who came in to benefit off those resources. And, you know, it was times that some of those folks who came outside of the community would come, you know, 2 to 3 times to get those resources. There was a number of times where people would take resources to their cars, change their clothing, come back and get more. And also people had went to other parts of the community where those resources was giving out certain labels and tags on those resources, and those resources were being actually sold. And I think that caused it a little bit of tension because there was people in the community, seniors, people with disabilities that maybe didn't have access to those services. And when they seen people taking advantage of those services in that way, it disappointed people and had people in a little of an uproar.
John Henry emphasizes that the competition for resources, jobs, and opportunities among minority groups creates tensions between them. As experienced by the Black community, integrating with other communities without mutual trust and understanding is an uphill struggle. The Asian community has also experienced an increase in racism. Annie Liu, whose parents are from China, is a member of the Asian community in San Francisco.
I remember there was a period of time in the beginning of the pandemic that I was actually a little bit afraid of like speaking Chinese on the streets because I wanted to seem more American and like not be like a target of some random frustrated person who's like frustrated with like the whole work from home and like not having a lot of places to vacation, etc. So I would say I've been feeling more racism in the city within the pandemic, and also the all the George Floyd rallies were happening. That was when I realized like I really want to stand by my roommate who is African American descent and join her when she was feeling hurt and like wants to go on a rally but also feels unsafe. There was also one very specific incident where one of our roommates like just kind of left our front door open, and as you can see how windy it is here, it just like the door blew open, and so all night it was wide open, and so our neighbors called the cops just to make sure that everything in the house was okay. When we heard like multiple men like bursting to the house, like come outside, like of course we all like rushed out. But once we were at the staircase, we were one floor up and then they were one floor down. They had guns like pointed straight at us, and that was a really big moment for me because I realized, oh my gosh, I'm so glad Arnetta didn't come out first, because again, like there's just like so much internal bias that like when it comes to like fight or flight reactions, it's just concerning to me. And in that moment, I felt very protective and thankful that I came out first. In San Francisco, I feel like I watch my back more now. And not just my back, but like on the bus when I'm commuting to work. I feel like I have my eyes on the like older Asian lady who just got on the bus and make sure that no one's messing with her. I hope it's not the new normal, this whole like violence against Asians type of thing. And to be honest, like I've had many thoughts multiple times in this pandemic of moving out of this country. I've like started making plans to like move to Singapore, like just be in a country where I don't feel threatened on like a violent level. Like I think I'm used to like racism on like more of like a language level. Like I can deal with that, but when it comes to like the violence that we've been seeing lately, it actually is very scary. And like I don't know if I want my parents to grow old in a community where they can't feel safe to just walk outside and like get groceries or something, and like for me to not have to worry wherever I'm at.
The COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent violence against Asian elders has sparked an increased awareness of racism in the city. This has caused many minority groups to live in fear, whether for themselves or for their loved ones. Bryant is a member of the Latinx community and a student at Lowell High School.
For me, my cultural background was really important for me because like in my school, like there's really no one like me. Whenever we would have like a world language, like a world festival or things like that, I would always like be proud of like who I was. Like my mom would make me my mariachi suits and things, and like it would be really cute looking at the pictures and stuff. And it makes me really proud because like both of my parents are hardworking, and like I really look up to them. For me to have Mexican heritage, it's like to like be just like my parents, like hardworking, like they're always like resilient, strong, and like almost everyone in my family is like hardworking, like teachers, business owners, like small shop owners and stuff like that. So I want to become like them and like setting an example for like maybe my kids or like my nephews. High school is like an elite public school here in San Francisco, and it's like I think the biggest school in the city with like about 3,000 kids. But going to Lowell, like being an elite school, it's mostly like Asian people and like white people, and like 10% of it is like just black kids, Mexican kids, and it's pretty tough because like it's kind of scary like being like the only Hispanic person or maybe the only person of color in a classroom filled with like a bunch of white kids. I've been like in like at least 5 out of like my 7 classes, I'm usually the only Hispanic person, and it's pretty like kind of like scary because like there's like no one that you could relate to, and it's like hard to find a group that you fit in. Sometimes I would like talk to people, try to like reach out to them, and like they would just like look at me and just like be like weirded out and just like look away because like, oh, you're not like us. And this one time, like I found like a small friend group that's just like me, like Hispanics, so it's pretty cool. Like I felt good at being at my school. But one time, like there was this kid that we were just like joking around, and he's white, and he was like, we were all talking about homework and stuff, and I was like, oh, I already did my homework, I'm already done, I'm good to like go out, hang out. And like straight to my face, he was like, oh, you don't look like the type to like do your work. And I was just like, I couldn't say anything, because like then I would like just like fill in the stereotype that we're aggressive and stuff. Like what Trump said, like rapists, drug dealers, like border hoppers. But I feel like none of that is true, because like that's almost like a small percent of what like of all the majority of people. And like Latinos, especially Latinos and Hispanics, are like some of the hardest working people out there. My parents, I look up to them like every single day. My sister has 2 kids, like they're all hardworking. All of my friends that I know of, like Hispanics, their parents are hardworking too. Like, and like those like stereotypes that like I do see, like it's almost a very small percent that it's like it's not true. Like you can't even like tell.
Ryan's experiences illustrate that racial discrimination can occur at a young age. In places where there is a lack of representation of certain groups, it is easy for stereotypes to solidify and lead to hurtful experiences. Mesa is a member of the Yemeni community in San Francisco and also identifies as Muslim.
To a different middle school, which wasn't as diverse as my elementary. So there was people who didn't say like anything directly to me, but I would hear them say like making jokes or stuff, like terrorist jokes, and I'm like, okay. And then they would say things like that we would say like in prayer, which I really thought was disrespectful, because like they were using it in a bad way. When we use it in a good way, it's just us praying to God or something like that. So I was also kind of confused, and it was my first time ever experiencing that, going to school, since it wasn't like as diverse. Me and my sister cover our hair when we go to the mosque. So as we were walking back to go home, there was this dude that was like behind us, and then he like cursed at us and called us terrorists. And I was so scared because I was like a lot younger. I thought he was like gonna hit us or something, but no, he just kept saying mean things. And my sister got mad at him, obviously. I was just really scared. So I was slowly taking the scarf off of my head. I was just like thinking about it, and I was like, how about if I do experience that more when I'm older? And I was also kind of shocked when it happened, because one, I've never really experienced anything. Second, it's really San Francisco. Like, I know there's still people who experience stuff like this, like racism and everything, but I feel like I don't hear it as much like here as I do in like maybe other countries or other cities, because of how diverse and inclusive it is here. So yeah, that's what I would think. Like, I was scared to even like cover my hair with the hijab, or like that I'm gonna eventually cover my hair with the hijab, because at that point I was like, I'm scared to be Muslim, like I'm scared to go out.
The kinds of racist events that Mesa experienced often persist in the memories of those affected. Stereotypes not only instill fear, they also reinforce and perpetuate racist ideologies and discrimination in our community. Asil is also a member of the Yemeni community in San Francisco who grew up in the Tenderloin district.
I started my first job when I was about 10 years old because my father was sick, so I had to become the breadwinner of my family, and that's something that goes on a lot in immigrant populations, especially in the Tenderloin. So, 10-year-old kid looking for a job, who's gonna hire you? And then it was mostly stores that would hire me. But even before that, I made $1,500 worth of cans in the period of 6 months. That's 5 cents a can. You do the math, and I'll help you there. It's actually 30,000 cans. So that's something that when I think about it, as a kid collecting 30,000 cans within 6 months, just so you can help your family. That within itself has helped me develop and has helped increase my work ethic. The Tenderloin is has the highest density of children per capita in the Bay Area. And it is filled with a low-income immigrant, first-generation immigrant population. And, I was one of those. My father sold everything he had for us to come into America so we can attain the American dream. And I remember, as a kid, walking the streets of the Tenderloin, I often thought, why is there a person that looks dead on the street right across of a police station? Why are there people dealing openly and not being really held accountable? And these are things that I grew up with, kind of just lingering in my head. Every day when I would walk to school, I was asked if I wanted to buy drugs, and then pretty soon I was asked if I wanted to sell drugs because I lived in the middle of an open-air drug market. Yeah, so, many people from Yemen who come here often are utilizing those who have been here before they have. Because they don't have access to things like language access, to mental health services, to social services, to culturally competent services. And that all traces back to, the lack of data. If we're labeling Middle Easterns as white on census, and if that's San Francisco's definition and America's definition of what it is to be white, then we're missing the needs of that community. My original name was Osama. But after 9/11, the name changed. It once meant nobility and power, and 9/11 and Osama bin Laden himself pretty much changed the meaning of the name to mean oppression and just terror. I had to grow up with that name. I remember an incident where one of my high school PE teachers, when they actually, I think, killed Osama bin Laden, when I walked in, said, "Hey, they just killed your cousin." And I remember that the class was laughing at me, and I had to laugh with them because I didn't want to lose my dignity. I wanted to change the name, but because my parents didn't really have access to language access, and legal services, it was really hard for them to get involved in pretty much the legal methodology of changing the name. But pretty soon, as I grew up and I myself became competent enough to actually change my name and go through the legal system, I changed my name to Asil, which means unique, and that's something that I strive to be. But I will never forget those days and those experiences where my name, Osama, those were days where I experienced a lot of bullying and just a lot of backlash from community, from all sides of the spectrum. Yeah, so if you take a look at where Yemenis are in terms of in the economy, you'll often find them, especially in the Tenderloin, in liquor stores, smoke shops, or even janitorial services, or even as your taxi or Uber drivers. Very rarely have I seen a Yemeni in politics, a Yemeni in the education system, a Yemeni in the healthcare, working in healthcare. And that's places which I wish, the Yemeni community can one day be at. And it's a community that needs to be illuminated, and it deserves the city's attention, because as of right now, yes, I do feel like this community is neglected in many forms. It's data inclusion, it's language access, it's mental services, culturally competent social services, etc. But it's also allowing us a voice and giving us a platform to really share and provide our perspectives.
Asil explains that his community is disempowered because of the lack of language, mental health, and culturally competent services. The lack of data, as well as adequate representation and leadership, play a major role in sustaining an environment of racism. Despite the overwhelming presence of racism in our society, combating racism is still possible, and that starts with building racial solidarity. What is racial solidarity, and how can we achieve it?
I liken it to the analogy of building a bridge. Before you can build a bridge, you have vision of things that you might want to connect, right? Land masses that you might want to connect, but you have to figure out how to get there. With racial solidarity, we're trying to do that. We're seeing two communities where we know there is possibility of a great mutual benefit because we've experienced some of that. But again, we haven't built it before. And so all we can do is begin to build that bridge place. But even with the bridges being built, there's always some retrofitting that needs to be done. There's still upgrades, and the steel or the steel rusts over time, and the concrete buckles potentially, or what have you. Or there may be something that, shakes up the bridge, right? An earthquake of some sort, some dramatic or traumatic experience in our social climax that might, shatter our bridge to some extent. We have to have folks out there who know how to do those repairs.
Especially if you're an immigrant or you always feel like you would want to make friends who with similar background, similar values, similar principles, simple like family, so that it's easy to share story. You don't have to explain as much and all that, right? But we also see a lot of our youth are also making friends across community, like with Latinx community or like the Black community or like Middle Eastern community. It really based on the school culture and the school community. And I think it's very important even from elementary school on to really talk about why is it important that we have to work cross-culturally and cross-racially, and also instill that history part of where everybody is coming from and how we all come to America. I think is very important values for them that we have to live in an anti-hate environment, and hate really will harm all of us, not just ourselves, not just others, but everybody in the community.
We have come to a place in this country where as soon as we don't agree with somebody, we want to cancel them. So what both sides of the conversation wants to do is be that platform where we could do things, speak to each other, and not agree with each other's perspective without having to have that judgment, and not having to feel like you're going to get canceled if you say your truth. People have different opinions, different perspectives, and we just try to keep that open where people can have that. Sometimes the conversations get colorful, sometimes they get passionate, but we try to keep the conversation from being personalized or personally attacked, but we try not to police tone people and their views, but we try to help correct them if we can, and at least be open to other perspectives and ideals. When these incidents take place, I think sometimes as just human beings, we go about our day. A lot of times attacks happen and things happen, and police brutality, things happen in the Black community. And I think sometimes our other community folks really don't understand the impact because it hasn't impacted them. And I think as some of these things started to happen in their community, they started to understand some of the pain and some of the things that was going on in our community. And what I want people to understand about solidarity is, we should not wait till we feel the pain that others go through or other people in the community go through. We should work together on standing by anytime there's an incident that takes place in any of our communities, that we show up and support them and make sure that whether it's justice, whatever it is, we stick together as a community and deal with the issue.
I don't feel like politics should necessarily be a career. Right? What we have right now is a system with career politicians, people who are looking for that promotion, right? I'm gonna go from the city to the state to a federal level, and then I'm gonna be a congressman for the next 40 years of my life. And when you do things like that, when people have to be voted in and you're trying to be voted into an office for the rest of your life, sometimes that means you're not really doing what you think is best for people. You're doing what's best for votes. Like policies and legislation needs to help people, and it should help as many people as humanly possible. And so when we write legislation, we have to acknowledge that sometimes it's just not going to make people happy, and sometimes that has to just be okay, because they may not be happy at the moment, but it's going to help people. A lot of the times the people who are unhappy with certain really tough decisions are the people who just don't benefit from the decision being made. Right? If you're deciding to make a building 100% affordable housing, and the people around the affordable housing is angry because they think it's going to bring in, bad things, it's not even open yet. You're making assumptions about something that hasn't even existed yet. What you're mad about is you think it's not going to benefit you, even though there might be 400 or 500 people going to this building that's going to benefit from affordable housing. Right. And I think, and there might be a politician that strikes down the opportunity for affordable housing because they're afraid that these other people won't vote for them the next time it's time to get reelected.
If one of us is oppressed, if one of us is taken down, they take us all down. And the easiest way to do that is by separating us and dividing us on the little differences that we have. But if you really look, like, those differences are beautiful, and we can all work together and understand. And maybe we don't understand, or we haven't been through the same struggle as another ethnicity or another group of color, but we can understand how it feels to struggle because of the color of our skin, because of our accent, or because where we came from. I really would love for people to come and get to know people from the Latinx community from different countries, learn about the culture, learn about the food, the dances, the language, and how wide and how different it is, so that when you go back and you're hearing other people talk about the Latinx community, you can say, well, actually, this is what I learned. And the reason why they do A, B, and C is because this comes from their culture, and this is what it means. And I think that having those conversations is what bridges the gap. And I would love for people to be able to have those conversations and really, truly get to know the Latino community.
What's happening now with some of the anti-Asian violence in this country, and unfortunately, a lot of the media reports that people see over and over again are Black on Asian violence. And, that concerns me for several reasons. First of all, I think everybody should be held accountable for the acts that they commit as individuals. If they commit a crime, I think they absolutely 100% should be held accountable for those acts. What I don't think should happen is that we associate the acts of a few people to an entire population. And so too often, people have seen video footage or news coverage of Black on Asian crime and use that to create this idea in their head that the anti-Asian hate and violence we're experiencing in this country is predominantly Black on Asian. When those who have actually broken down the data, who have collected it, who have aggregated it and analyzed it, find that 75 to 80% of all acts of hate towards Asians are committed by white males. And I think we all have to challenge ourselves to make sure that we understand that when we see something on the news or in the media, those are the acts of a few individuals or maybe one individual, and has nothing to do with an entire race of people.
I feel like if we really care about racial solidarity, if we really care about equity, now is our time to empower people, not 10 years from now, not 5 years from now. We're losing people every year because they can't afford to live in this city. Give more neighborhoods community ambassadors to look out for each other. Don't defund resource hubs that serve the people. Those are your priority, because the reason why your city goes downhill and we have homeless people and we have problems is because we're not giving the people that are here the resources to serve the people that are here.
What's very important is we as community leaders who are out there should really take the lead in bridging those relationships with other communities. And it doesn't have to be big, it can be very small, but it is important as leaders to take that first step and reach out and create that understanding. It can be as simple as reaching out, having a coffee, and trying to get to understand each other. I personally don't believe that we should head on immediately say okay, there's an issue, we have to solve it. It's like, you don't even know each other. Even as when you get to know new people or friends, you want to build that relationship first. And that's the same for community leaders, where maybe if we haven't got that relationship, we should start to try to reach out to each other, understand each other pain points, challenges, and then on the long run, really hopefully we can create that trust and bond and nurture a relationship where we can start working together on solutions and work together on those common grounds and challenges that we are facing.
Building relationships, building solidarity is not a social media post. It's not a donation. Building racial solidarity is continuous relationship building. Over and over, and especially the hard ones where you want to quit, where you butt heads with another person. That's the solidarity you really need to focus on. And the city needs to foster that through action, not lip service, and hear each other and create programs where it empowers people to continue building those relationships, and that's the most important part. It has to be consistent and it has to be action-based.
My family used to take me to Chinatown to grocery shop all the time. So I was out here pretty regularly, and I remember seeing a lot of the line dance when I was younger and being like, oh my God, the colors and the sounds are so crazy, but I never thought that I would end up being the one doing it. So that was a kind of nice full circle thing to come back to. I actually had no intention to start. My friend joined the year before me, and then she was like, oh my God, you gotta come do this with me. It's so fun. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll just come out like once a week, see what it's like. But then coming out here, I actually was able to reconnect with a lot of my culture that I wasn't connected to before. Like my whole family speaks Cantonese, but I didn't really know how to speak it and just wasn't able to communicate that well with my grandparents and stuff before I joined the troop. And then a bunch of people here spoke Cantonese, Mandarin, and so just by like giving myself that immersive kind of experience, I was able to bring that back home and like speak more to my grandparents, which I'm very happy about. I went to Lowell High School, so most of my classmates, they're like 80% Asian, you know, so I never really felt like I was a minority, but it's just that a lot of my friends as well were not very connected to their cultures either, and so when we're all together, it was just like, there was just no reason for me to try to dive deeper into my own culture. I think if people were able to embrace their culture and also learn about other people's cultures as well, everyone would just be more accepting in general. Because when you're so, or I feel like when I wasn't connected to my history, like I didn't really care too much about what everyone else was doing. I was just living my own life. But learning about like the struggles of everyone who came before me, learning about like other communities in the city who are also struggling, you kind of gain more empathy for others. And, you know, hopefully that would reduce a lot of the violence that we were seeing because, you know, especially since we're in Chinatown, like every other day it was like really concerning to hear about all of our like elders getting attacked and stuff. So yeah, hopefully more empathy for everyone coming through the city.
In my friend groups, I don't think there's ever any like tension between us and our races. I feel like it's also something we talk about. But one thing I really like about my friends, or especially friends from like elementary school, they're always like engaging with each other's cultures and like learning about each other's cultures. Like I had two of my friends, they came over to my house and they were really excited to try on the hijab, which made me really happy. And they were looking at each other and they were like, oh my God, you look so cute, you look so cute. And I thought that like that made me really happy because sometimes I would always like, with my religion and like my culture, I would like feel embarrassed about it because it's more different. But like my friends really they don't make me feel embarrassed. They make me wanna, I don't know, what's the word? Like embrace it. Yeah, they make me wanna embrace my culture and my identity.
Well, I define racism as like lack of opportunities for people like minorities, because like racism has always prevented like Black people, Hispanics, like Asians, and like people to grow. Like there's no, like, you don't see like Mexicans or like Hispanics or Black people like living in like mansions like white people do. Like you don't see them in like nice jobs, nice cars. It's always like them in poverty and like working hard for like just to like meet the bare minimum of like their needs. It's important to solve racism and like reach like racial solidarity, because like that's what this country is all about, like freedom, liberty. And if only a certain people can achieve that, then like there's really no point in like kind of like bragging about like, oh, how free this country is, how great this country is, if there's like almost like only a small people like get to enjoy all that, and like while the rest, like minorities, have to struggle like day to day.
You know, for the city to reach racial solidarity, I want the city to engage through community process, and I want people from the community representing the community. If it's other people speaking on behalf of the community that aren't from there, I'm not confident that we'll get to the places that we want. I want us to elevate the voices of community, and when I'm talking about community, I'm talking about the youth. I'm talking about elevating youth voice. I'm talking about considering the seniors and small businesses, and just making sure that nobody is left out in the decision-making process, and that the leaders are coming from within the community. Human, and we're all here we all have our differences, and our differences make us amazing. And that's something that I take pride in, especially living in San Francisco, is being a pluralist city where we strive to being accepting of one another. And you know, for us to reach racial solidarity, we're gonna have to have these difficult conversations, and we're gonna have to start mixing with each other and getting to know each other for who we are, and not being victims to propaganda and, you know, just and news, because, you know, some news are fake news. But I would say, you know, just to achieve racial solidarity, we need to look at each other and love each other regardless of our differences.
While we are far from racial solidarity, it is something we must consistently strive for. As Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." Ultimately, racial solidarity is achieved when all communities come together through deliberate efforts to understand, empathize, and stand with people of all races.